Hey people. So I want to talk about uh, the kink lifestyle pre-Fetlife. Fetlife was created in 2008. It was a spin-off of a website called Friends with Fetishes. And the thing was, prior to 2008, there's a lot of history. um, let's go back to some of the earliest days of kink. Kink, for the most part, was a rich, exclusive royalty. You did not do kink, especially openly, um, at all. It just was not. People did not talk about it openly. It was always an underground, dirty little secret. You can go and look at the Marquis de Sade and read some of his works to see what I'm talking about. The Marquis de Sade, again, was part of that nobility class. He was not just a common lay person. It did not exist pretty much for the common layperson except for a little bit of stuff done at home. There was no organizations or clubs or anything that you could go to that existed for a common person. It just didn't exist. It wasn't until around probably the early 1900s where small organizations started coming into existence. Kink itself started to expand into the worlds of like pornography and things like that. Um, Betty Page, some of her best known work is her bondage work. Even though personally she was not into kink outside um, of her professional work, her work that she did doing bondage stuff was some of the best known work when it comes to this kind of material. Um, Beyond that, it was a slow thing, and it only happened in major cities like in New York, Los Angeles, and even with that, there was always the worry of being, of worrying about the authorities coming in and arresting people, especially during the 1950s, the late 40s into the 50s. And this happened actually all the way up until probably the early 80s, where organizations had to worry about being raided by police. Um, Again, if you wanted to communicate, that was something you had to either do over the phone, in person, or by mail. That's going to be a whole separate other video. The What it comes to mail, that's a whole separate thing. Um, Around the world, prior to the early 1900s, uh, kink was exclusive in very private clubs, and the only way that you could get into those private clubs is you were rich, you were powerful, you were famous, or you were a female that looked really nice. It's pretty simple. If you didn't fall in those categories, that was it. Probably the most famous of these clubs is a club called the Hellfire Club. Since then, um, places have people have used it. Marvel has used the Hellfire Club name for a name within their universe. But the original Hellfire Club was basically a kink club. Probably the most famous member of it was Thomas Jefferson. Sorry, not Thomas Jefferson. Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin, who was very much known as a man who would pretty much screw anything with um, two legs and a vagina, was definitely a member of that club. It was again a very secretive, private, underground. You had to know somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody to be able to even get involved in it. Um, these places did exist, but they were very, very secretive. If you go to the story of O, which was written in the early 1900s, it was about an organization like this following one specific person's journey. uh, these do you know this these did exist, but they were very, very secretive. Again, you knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody to be able to get involved. uh, Down the road, it still had to worry about, up until probably the mid 80s, early 90s, of police raiding the clubs. Doesn't happen very much nowadays. It still does happen in ultra conservative areas, like here where I'm at in Utah. You it's you There is no real clubs. They're all houses that people allow parties to happen in. Even places that are established as clubs to us, to the outside world, they're just homes. Okay, so you can go through the history and see that if you wanted to be involved with kink, you had to really know somebody to be able to make that happen. When I first got in the community, it was still kind of that way. You had to know somebody who knew somebody to be able to just get involved in the community. Prior to the internet, that was still, it was very secretive. And even today, with things like Fed and so on, there's a lot of people who like to hide what they do. And I don't see any issue with that at all. I've made one or two mistakes via this channel where I talked just a little too much and got in a little bit of trouble. But I'm still working that out, and it'll take some time. But that's just the way the community works. It still tries to keep itself private, and it's understood. But, anyways, when the internet first started up, the first places that the community started to show itself were on BBS boards. If you don't know what BBS boards were, they were you had to use a dial-up modem. You logged into one of these boards and you were able to communicate either anonymously or you could out yourself. The next place that really started to take a place hold was over on AOL. AOL was the probably where the first major foothold started coming into existence, is where people who were not part of the community could find out about the community. So that's, Munches started up probably in the 60s or 70s, probably in the late 60s, early 70s, but didn't really get a foothold until somewhere around the time that AOL started to come into existence. After AOL kind of was starting on its downturn, two sites really were the main host of the kink community, and that was Yahoo, using the Yahoo forums, and alt.com. Now, there had been other websites that had tried to make themselves the known site, but kind of never grabbed hold. Alt.com, for the longest time, was the place to go. That was the deep part of the community. Unfortunately, alt.com got bought by a company that tried to turn it into a dating site, and it still is there today as that. No one in the community that I really know frequents that, because all of a sudden alt.com, which was a site where you could go communicate, talk to people, do very much most of the same stuff that you can do on Fed, you did on alt. But after alt got bought, and suddenly all of these features started showing up behind a paywall, everybody just disappeared. And so for a little bit, places like the Yahoo forums became the place to go, where you could talk about clubs, munches, things in the lifestyle, but to kind of a limited extent. After that, then that's about the time that FET came into existence. FET has, like I said, has been around since around 2008. So we're about 2 years away from its 10th anniversary. and its existence has radically changed the BDSM community. It has created a place where anybody could go and actually talk about what this lifestyle is and what this lifestyle does. Now, quickly back to something else. There has been raids on clubs for a long time. Okay, probably to my mind, what's the biggest is what's called the San Diego Six. This was a lesson for the community. What happened with the San Diego Six is pretty uh, pretty amazing. At the time, San Diego had a very um, conservative district attorney who didn't like the BDSM community. And so he kept looking for opportunities to make a statement about it. And that opportunity presented itself in the fact that a club in the San Diego area decided to hold an event where you could buy tickets in public, specifically at a porn shop. This was a mistake. You don't do that. You don't offer tickets to anybody. You offer, you have to go through, have to go through a process. You should have to have a reference. You should have to go to in an orientation, something. And this is something that's become a standard within the community. Not only do you have to go through an orientation, but you have to sign a form that says you're not an agent of the police, you're not acting as an agent of the police. And there are police involved in the BDSM community, and I might turn that into its own video. But you're not acting as an agent of police, you're not acting as an agent of the federal government, and you're not acting as an agent of the Postal Service. Again, that's a separate video. But for the longest time, to get into a club, you had to know somebody who knew somebody to be able to get in. Now, depending on where you are, depends on what the structure is. Some places you just show up to a munch and boom, you're invited to the clubs. Some places you have to have a sponsor. Some places you have to go through and show that you are somebody who is worth them bringing in. There's a whole process to it. So, like I said, the pre-Fetlife community was definitely a different community. Fetlife has definitely made this community more solid. Has made it more whole. There was some kerfuffle a little earlier this year with their sign-up process. They've kind of fixed it in a way, and I think that moving forward, it should be very interesting to see what happens. So yeah, that's kind of what life was prior. I know it's kind of to cover a lot of history in a very short period of time, but that's kind of it. So that's it for now. Be well and safe.